Hello, my name is Abby Matu, and this is my final project for African Studies. The topic I chose to focus on was the Atlantic slave trade with a little bit of religion tied in to add an element of death. The Atlantic slave trade started in the 16th century and ended in the 19th century. However, even after laws were passed that legally ended the slave trade, it illegally continued for 50 more years post. This occurred within the four countries of Europe, North America, South America, and Africa. For 300 years, Africans were enslaved and put through horrendous conditions. The boats that they were transported on were filled way past capacity, and they were physically treated as cargo. Disease and illness often broke out, killing many Africans. On top of the physical and psychological abuse, women were often sexually molested and exploited not only on the ship but also into their enslaved work time. One important note that ties both focuses is that Africans themselves would weaponize their religious deities or gods and would create this judgment trial for their fellow Africans. Those deemed unworthy would be sold into slavery by their own. It was not until the beginning of the Industrial Revolution that the Atlantic slave trade was legally ended because there was no longer a need for human labor, not due to a realization of morals, unfortunately. For this interview, I decided to focus on people within my generation to test my hypothesis that American society facilitates the formation of a biased and uneducated historical view of Africa in use, which can be seen through the general education system, mass media representation, and the dangers of a single story. I asked participants to answer a series of questions in regard to these topics. After completing those, I had them read the prior paragraph of information I described, as well as an article detailing the ways in which Africa had modernized more than the media portrays it to have. Finally, I had them summarize their thoughts in regard to reading about this information and what people should take away from this interview. Let's get into it.
Okay, hi Abby. So when I first think of Africa, some of my first thoughts are unfortunately the lack of resources they have there, like access to clean water and housing. So that's definitely a big thing that comes to my mind, just thinking of people who go on medical mission trips or religious mission trips to provide medical care or housing or help with clean water, things like that. I also think of South Africa, which is built up and a lot different than what you think of when people go on missions trips to Africa. Um, and I can also even think of like African safaris with all the wildlife.
When I think of Africa, my first thoughts are usually turned to slavery, which is not. It's just what my first thought is. That, and then the francophone countries.
First thoughts, kind of imagine Africa on the map. Uh, Wildlife like zebras, lions, giraffes, elephants.
I would say I've gotten most of my knowledge back in high school, so it's been a while, and I know I've definitely, unfortunately, forgotten a lot about Africa.
Um, I got most of my knowledge from Africa, or of Africa, from like my like middle school, like history classes, but not really anything else. Didn't really learn much else, which is sort of upsetting.
Either movies or in middle school, intermediate school. That's about it. Not much.
Honestly, Africa is such a big place that I'm sure there's a lot of religions that make up Africa. I would say Christianity would be a big religion in Africa, just because it's a big religion, I believe, all over the world, so I'm sure there is some influence there.
I think, is it Christianity? I don't know.
Religion, I could honestly not tell you what religion is predominant uh, in Africa.
It comes as a little surprise. I did think Christianity would be a religion in Africa, but it makes sense, I guess, reading that how it was spread very early on and it has stuck.
I don't actually know. I don't know why, but that sounds correct. I feel like Christianity is one of the most widespread religions, so it's sort of just like that makes sense. Also, I think that was like that should be around where everything happened, right? Like where Jesus is and yada yada blah
I
blah.
would not have first guessed that Christianity would be the predominant religion, um, but not too surprised by it. Uh,
I definitely know it's a part of Africa's history, and unfortunately, just taking people from Africa and moving them around the world to work as slaves. I don't couldn't honestly tell you when it started, when it ended.
I know that a bunch of people, a bunch of black people and African people, were crammed into boats, um, boats that were not big enough for the amount of people that they were carrying, crowded on top of each other. Some people died, and then disease was spread between the corpse and the other people around. And even then, if one person got sickly, the rest of them did. I know that happened. I know that slaves were treated as, well, not people.
Transatlantic slave trade. Never really studied it, but I figured Europeans may have gone over, kidnapped them, and brought them over. And that was my general guess, but I don't think I ever really studied or read about that. However, I do know they were loaded up on ships, like hogtied and sent underneath the ship deck, still tied up, very poor living conditions, not really allowed to come up above deck at all, hardly any food. A lot would die on the passage over.
I'm guessing as they were moving around the world, they were still spreading Christianity and other religions, or like taking their religions from Africa and coming to the United States with those religions. So I think they were probably being spread, and people probably looked to their religion as just like a savior or something to think about.
That's an interesting question. Assuming Europeans were Christian, uh, see, I really don't know, and I can't really fairly speak because the culture and the social norms in that time period are completely different than what we kind of accept today, such as slavery, and rights for any human. If they were Christian and trying to still follow the Bible, they may have tried to extract certain things from the Bible to make them feel okay, feel like what they're doing is okay. That's my best guess.
That is a good question. I would imagine that they were praying to the God that they believe in, like as like a please dear God save me sort of deal, um, or there was a lack of that and it turned into why did you do this to us? But I don't know.
I'm not really sure. I would guess like 1800s, maybe a little bit before then. And how do you think the slave trade came to a stop? I'm guessing just like eventually laws came into place and stopped the slave trade and stopped slaves, because I know they were unfortunately really popular in the United States.
I have absolutely no clue when it could have started. Um, to stop, I'm going to guess around the Civil War.
I don't know what number to throw around because I don't know. We learned about this for approximately 1 month, and I was in a very white school, and I just got stared at the whole time. I don't know. I'd say that I don't know. Was it like the 1500s? And then it was just for forever after that until Babe Lincoln. Not even Babe Lincoln. It was after that it was like officially like cut off because there was still a lot of shit happening after that.
So mass media definitely, you have to take it with a grain of salt, almost like knowing where you get your information from, like who it comes from, where it comes from, just all that kind of stuff. So some of the surprising things to me was that Africans used religion as a part of their the slave trade to get their own people into the slave trade. So that's surprising because they're kind of using it against their people to get them to do this terrible thing or go live this terrible life, and saying that they'll be judged by God and they'll be sacrificed if they didn't do it. So that's surprising to me. Also, how the Atlantic slave trade ended because of the Industrial Revolution, because they didn't need human labor anymore. That's pretty surprising to me. I would think it's due to war and laws. So that's something surprising that honestly I should read more about and learn about. We could probably all do our own research and learn more about Africa, even if we thought we learned about something in high school or college classes. We might not have learned the whole thing or only remember certain parts of it like I did.
The poverty percentage did surprise me a little bit. I mean, I knew that it wasn't as strong as like commercials set it out to be. They're like, oh my god, everyone is like, no, that's not how it works. The fact that they like African people were enslaving their own people, and using the god that they believe in or their deity to like help them with that. Mass media is ass a majority of the time. Like they will try and say that African people are poor and like don't, and they can't help themselves. Like, no, they're people, besties. I'm sure they can manage. So learn, educate, understand why people think the way that they do now. Also understand that people would probably still be enslaved if the Industrial Revolution didn't happen.
Extracting stuff from the Bible and kind of finding tidbits of information and quotes from the Bible to make it sound like what they're doing is okay. So for a country or continent as large as Africa, yikes, I am getting mixed up with terms. These days, I feel like media outlets are only in there to grab your attention so they can have the viewers so they can get the money, which is very frustrating because they can twist things up. I guess for any topic, if you're going to talk about it and give your opinions and try to educate people or whatever, share, to be you yourself also be informed, well informed, and to research about it.
Hello, I am back, and there are a few points I want to go over after hearing the answers to the interview questions. First off, I am pleasantly surprised by where they get their information from. It is mostly from middle school or high school time as opposed to media like I hypothesized. It seems like they are very educated and know that you have to take mass media with a grain of salt, and a lot of it is exaggerated, especially in regard to Africa and of course many other subjects. It is unfortunate though that their education does come from long ago, which is middle school, high school, which is anywhere between 3 and 7 years for them prior to this interview, which is unfortunate. People will not learn about Africa in a general college setting or day-to-day life unless they are actively seeking out that information. So it is very realistic and a problem that a lot of information is westernized that we have from our school time before college, and that will stick with us unless we actively seek out that information. Also, something that was very interesting to me was when I asked the question in regard to how religion plays a role in the Atlantic slave trade, they all gave kind of more positive views, as in the enslaved people would use that as a form of comfort. However, they were surprised that it was weaponized by not only the Europeans but also the Africans, which I think was a very important part, that there is a dual side to both. I really enjoyed that aspect of seeing how they would view religion. Also, it seemed a lot of them did not really understand the time, how long it lasted, which I myself did not know or really fully understand how long it lasted, and that it even lasted legally. They did suspect that, but that was very important. Overall, I'm very proud to say that I think my hypothesis was disproved a little bit. I think that a lot of people in our generation are more educated than I would have originally thought prior to this interview, but it does seem that people understand that Africa is not only modernized, but also is not as impoverished as it is displayed, and they know a fair bit about their history, at least in regard to the Atlantic slave trade, more than I would have originally suspected. I do hope that some of them do go on to research this a little bit more and hopefully spread that knowledge, as I hope to do as well. But yeah, thank you.